Goeiedag, good day, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world.
I've been looking around for salvation. I've been looking around for the truth. All around me I see frustration, and I looked all over till I found you. I sit and listen to your stories, and you're telling me, please don't worry. A lot in this world you should know, and love in life is where you should go. If you're looking for somewhere to go, if you're looking for someone to know, if you're looking for someone to guide you, then love in life will guide you.
Goeienaand, good evening, fellow South Africans and citizens of the world. And wow, tonight's going to be a lot of fun. You're going to have two historians talking. Now, please remember to bookmark our new video platform under development. You will find it in the link below, the website. It is at lovinglifetv.com. That's lovinglifetv.com. Here you will see over 6,000 videos covering several years from our unique perspective once we go live. We will be leaving YouTube probably in the next 12 months and do daily video updates and more on this new platform. I'm going to show you an image and some video footage taken at Brackenfell, where you can make your own decision on whether what was going on is racist or not. Let me show you that. Okay, there you have an African, or two Africans, one with their face painted white and with a dog chain around his neck. Of course, that doesn't merit being covered by the mainstream media, does it? No, no, no. Well, how about this? Let's watch this.
To you, and you must listen. There's a racist here called your hands peace. That racist took our parent. That racist took our parent. Now what's going to happen, fighters? We are giving these police 1 hour to go and look for your hands peace, because he stays around this community to bring our parent back. If in 1 hour these police are useless, they're not bringing our parent back, who's this one? What is the problem? What is the fucking problem? Don't do that. Move! Move! Pick up shit! Move! 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 Fighters! Fighters! I'm a potato! Fighters! 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 I'm a party! I'm a potato!
Okay. I don't know about you, but I find that video footage very, very disturbing. In my view, what you saw there goes much further. It reflects three things. One, how the minority white population in South Africa have been persecuted by the corrupt ANC government and their terrorist arm, the Economic Freedom Fighters. 2. How the South African Human Rights Commission is party to this race-based persecution. And 3. The complicity of the South African media in the cover-up of a genocide against the white population in South Africa. The image of an African with his face painted white and a dog chain around his neck is somehow considered acceptable by the media in South Africa and the South African Human Rights Commission. It is not. Let me read you a short piece from an article in IOL written by Nomalanga Shuma, where they report on the attack against the white man by the EFF fighters I just showed you in the video. It reads, despite numerous calls for Brackenfell residents to not engage with EFF protesters during their protest on Friday in the community, a white resident made his way to the front of the EFF's makeshift stage in the middle of Frans Conradie and allegedly hurled racial slurs and profanities at the crowd while the party's General Secretary, Marshall Dlamini, was speaking. EFF members responded to the provocation by beating and stomping on the man as he lay screaming at their feet. He was rescued by the police a few minutes later. Police called on the crowd to disperse, which was met with some resistance at first, and quickly turned around as the police began firing rubber bullets, throwing stun grenades, released tear gas, and utilized water cannon trucks. Now, if you watched my live stream on Brackenfell, you will see what the white man was saying was, "Why do you hate me?" I'll repeat that. What the white man was saying to Marshall Dlamini, or whatever he is, "Why do you hate me?" Now, IOL alleged he was hurling racial slurs and then used that to justify the attack on him. The only person arrested that day was this white man. This is a deception being sold by the mainstream media in South Africa. It is disgraceful. Loving Life family, the pot is boiling. When I first started reporting on South Africa a few years ago, what happened at Brackenfell would have been unthinkable. Tonight I'm talking to Harry Booyens, a historian whose book Amabulu is a must-read. You can buy it on Amazon site. Links below this video. Tonight he is going to put a historical perspective behind the corrupt ANC and terrorist EFF claims of land ownership across South Africa. As a historian myself, I'm really looking forward to this live stream tonight. Let me get Harry on. Here we go. While Harry's coming on, please remember to put your questions in the side chat, and also please, if you haven't already done so, please subscribe. Hi Harry.
Hi Scott.
Your screen looks perfect, absolutely perfect. I can see your book behind you, Amabulu.
Does it read the right way round, though?
It does indeed. Everything is absolutely perfect.
Okay, sir.
Right, now Harry, we've had a bit of a chat before this discussion tonight, and you have a very interesting background. Can you tell us about growing up in South Africa? You know, a few of your memories about early South Africa.
Yeah, kind of nice there, sir. I didn't think I had an interesting background.
Everybody does.
Yeah, I figured it was in that category, you know. I grew up as an ordinary Afrikaans kid, the first city-born generation, the son of a load master on the railways. His whole family was railway guys. And my mother became a clerk at CNA,
right?
The book distributors, which was a significant item in what happened to me. I was born in Port Elizabeth. I think you have a 1820 settler picture
I
around there
do.
somewhere.
I do. I'll put it up on the screen. Hang on a second. Where
Uh,
is it? Where is it? Where is it? Where? Here we are. I've got it. Okay.
okay. I hopefully sent them to you in sequence. So what? So Port Elizabeth is where the 1820 settlers landed. At that point, it was pretty much the furthest east that you could really call civilization. Grahamstown had been created, so that was
Right.
out further east, but it was little more than a military post. So I was born there, and I'm pretty representative of what I would call the Eastern Frontier folks, or the pool from which the so-called modern Boer is born. And anyway, I always styled myself a 100% Afrikaner guy until I discovered I actually did have an ancestor in the British Army, but he was an Italian deserter who walked over to the Brits. And his name was Andrea Matteo Destro, written into the fancy genealogical research guys as being a Swede who came to South Africa via Venice. But he married an Afrikaans girl in the Catholic Church in Caledon. I don't know how many Catholic Swedes you know, so that caused
That's
me to
very
smell
different,
out.
isn't it?
Yeah, and so one day I was searching for my wife's one British Army ancestor, and lo and behold, what do I stumble over on the same list? Andrea Matteo Destro, who was one of the men that walked over to the Brits at Cadiz in the Peninsular War. And
Right.
so the Brits put him in the 60th Regiment, sent him to the Cape. Anyway, so I'm supposed to be 100% Boer, but like most 100% Boers, we discover there's something else in the mix. One day when I was, I must have been about two, just over two, and my dad said we're going to move to this incredibly grand new home, a house all of our own. We would actually have an indoor toilet, and we'd actually have a kitchen. We would no longer just be living in two rented rooms without a toilet. We used to have to go outside for that, to an outside toilet and stuff like that.
Right.
So I grew up in a poor family, and since I've had questions about, how many slaves that we own, these are questions that I've got
Ah,
from Canadians
we're
and
talking about
Americans.
white monopoly capital, are we?
Oh yeah.
Carry
But
on. Yeah.
we can get to a picture of that in a minute.
Yeah.
My folks came from the Great Karoo and the Eastern Midlands, as they're called in the weather forecast. So places like Middelburg, Cape, Graaf-Reinet, Janssenville, and then to the west at Oudtshoorn and Calitzdorp. My dad came from the Little Karoo, my mother from the Great Karoo. And I've sent you a picture of what that hinterland of mine looks like. The second picture is pretty representative and usually freaks out Americans because, as you can see, it's snowy mountains, but there's a little blow-uppy in front. And that's very representative of that part of the world.
Right.
Lots of kudu, lots of animals, a great animal population and all that kind of stuff. But it's also the part of the world where the history of today's South Africa was really born. That's where all the weird stuff happened. It's the events in that part of the world that caused the Great Trek. It's from there that the various wars were conducted. It's really the crucible of South African history, that part of the world.
Well, that was right on the border of Grahamstown, wasn't it? They've got that
just
the trees where you can actually see where the actual battles took place.
Yeah, to the west and northwest of Grahamstown. But that Graaf-Reinet area was the frontier through most of the 1700s until 1811.
Right.
So having discussed the hinterland and where my parents came from, we move on to this fancy house that we moved into, the slave mansion that the Americans and Canadians want to know about. I believe I sent you picture number 3, which is the slave mansion I grew up.
Yes, yes, yes. In fact, I showed that earlier, but I'll just put it back up again.
Uh,
Okay.
and my mother helped my father mix the concrete for the lintel over that veranda in front, and he put up the roof. And that's I took that picture in 2012. The house is still standing.
Wow.
Now, that picture was taken from a thing that I call the grassy knoll. It's an open park with some playground stuff diagonally across the road.
Right.
And since Americans always go on about Kennedy having been shot from the grassy knoll, this was my grassy knoll. And one day when I wasn't quite 4 years old, my mother took me on the grassy knoll. It was evening. She hoisted me on her arm. She pointed up at the sky and showed me a moving star, which was really weird. And she says it's called Sputnik.
Oh, okay.
And that people called scientists put it up there. And so, that was the moment I no longer wanted to be an engineer on the railway like my dad had suggested. I no longer wanted to be a farmer, which is what my grandfather was. I wanted to be a scientist, whatever that was exactly. And but they also added for me that they were really scared about it, and they kept talking about things called Russians. I didn't quite follow what it was.
I always thought Russians were black.
And, and so there I was on the infamous grassy knoll, staring at Sputnik, deciding at the tender age of just under 4 that I wanted to be a scientist and that I had to worry about things called Russians. Okay, so that
That's
was
quite
my
a mixed bag.
that's my initiation in life. And since it was the East Cape, where English and Afrikaans folks were in the same mess together, it was never a politicized part of the world as far as the Afrikaans-English separation was concerned. And the kid next door was English speaking. So I had to learn to speak English, obviously, otherwise this wasn't going to work. And so I took the sixpence my parents had given me for that month, and I went off to the Chinese store 2 blocks away, and I bought myself an Eastern Province Herald and started to read, to the intense amusement of the entire family when I referred to people as poopla. But I learned English by the time I was 6 years old and went to school. I could do maths, and I wanted to be a scientist, and I could speak English pretty well.
Now talking about that, wanting to be a scientist, you and I would remember so well back in the mid-1970s when there was nothing. There was only the radio, and then the television arrived. Now, we didn't have the benefit of having live streaming software on the internet and computers and stuff like that. I mean, that was completely foreign to us, wasn't it? And
No,
as you say, the news came through the papers. But
the news came through the papers.
yeah, but tell me about the first time you got a TV set, because I remember back then it was such a big deal.
Yeah, with my mother working at CNA, and I should come back to that in a minute about books. With my mother working at CNA, that company also had like a popular electronics wing in Port Elizabeth, and my mother could get a discount from them since she worked at CNA. So unbeknownst to her, my dad would take his lunch break, drive over to that company. He'd be on the floor just below her without her knowing, and he'd be trying to buy equipment. And one day he came home with a television. There was no TV in South Africa, but my father gave it pride of place. He stuck it against the one wall, and he'd rush home to come and stare at this stupid test signal.
Yeah, the test signal.
So there's Harry and the Booyens family all staring intently at this test signal because sometime or other something's going to happen.
I remember that so well. Carry on.
And so one day eendag was eendag, as they would say. One day was one day. My dad came home. He was hardly back. He sat down. He got a plate of food. And I swear to you, the next moment, the screen moved. It moved. Okay, this was so weird. I mean, the TV screen, it moved. I'm telling you, it moved. There was a face on it. And lo and behold, it was Rian Kruiwagen's face. And we were to hear his voice, like forever. And then it was followed by Stefan Grappelli playing that stupid fiddle of his until I could throw up. And Jacques Cousteau, who was doing underwater photography, until somebody in one of the newspapers showed a TV with a broken screen and water running out with fish in it. So they realized they'd gone too far. And there was also a really irritating program from French Canada under the title Sol and Gobelet. I just shook my head. I couldn't believe that humans were watching that junk.
Yeah. Yeah.
But during the day, getting to be a slightly older kid, I would lie on the floor listening to shortwave radio, and I very quickly realized that, hang on a second, this other very perfect English voice that I was hearing wasn't the BBC, it wasn't the SABC, it was actually Radio Moscow, who had better English than the Brits. I'm telling you, sir.
Wow.
They spoke a better English, a more perfect English, accentless, completely accent-free, okay, except they were gargling this, unmentionable stuff.
Yeah.
And so then I tuned around a little bit more, and I started picking up the transmissions of the ANC from Dar es Salaam, and I was getting Radio Peking. And the Russian station, Radio Moscow, would switch over at 5 o'clock in the afternoons. They'd play trumpet music, and they would announce, this is the transmission of Radio Peace and Progress.
Oh, yeah.
And they would focus on things like South Africa and all that kind of stuff. And then somewhere in between floated a rather misbegotten Voice of America, completely out of touch with all the others. It was like there was a world that was functioning, and then here one side was the United States with the Voice of America. Other little bit there, I guess, is that because my mother worked at the CNA, if they couldn't sell all the copies of a particular issue of Time, Life, or Newsweek, she'd bring them home. And so from as early as I can remember, I had Time, Life, and Newsweek in the house. And whenever I read it, I realized that what they said was not what I saw out the window. I lived in South Africa. They wrote about it, and it didn't check. So I knew about the malicious and lying media since I was about 6. I've had it all my life. I've known it all my life. I've seen it all my life. Okay, and I saw this propaganda battle all my life because I was listening to Radio Peking, Radio Moscow, the BBC, Voice of America, you name it. And I was getting ANC transmissions. The only thing good about it, I thought, was the opening music line. The rest was junk.
Right.
But so that was my calibration in life. And it means that when the Cuban Missile Crisis happened, I knew all about it. I was on top of all of that stuff, more so, I guess, than my family. I can remember distinctly standing in the kitchen, worried to death that we were all going to slowly die from radiation poisoning.
Yeah.
And that the Americans would be fortunate in being wiped out instantly. My family didn't seem to notice, and they were having a braai in the garden. That picture is frozen into my memory.
Yeah.
Me standing in the kitchen with my little Airfix models that I was building, looking at my family thinking, what the hell is wrong with me?
Yeah. For those who don't know about that, can you explain how the Russians were bringing nuclear missiles towards Cuba, and how Kennedy
the nuclear missile crisis, or the Cuban Missile Crisis, I guess October, November 1962. Look, I've climbed into my American friends about this because it was preceded by an event where the Americans tried to go into Cuba, And when things turned a little against the men on the beach, Kennedy deserted them and kind of swore them off, threw them to the wolves. And that became known as the debacle of the Bay of Pigs. Khrushchev in Russia figured, this this guy has got guts. He doesn't know how to play the game. He's a weakling, etc., etc. And so, since Khrushchev was worried about the U.S. having nuclear missiles on his border in Turkey, he got this bright idea that he's going to load a bunch of nuclear missiles on ships, sail them to Cuba, and set them up. Give me just a second here.
Sure.
I should have unplugged that phone.
That's okay.
Too many attorneys in my life. American ones, New York attorneys, too many in my life. Just kidding. I love them. Yeah, they work with my clients, so I like them. They shipped these missiles to Cuba and started setting them up, and that is when a U-2 spy plane overflight picked up on these things being there. And Kennedy actually lived up to the moment, kind of, sort of, and eventually put a cordon around the island, around Cuba, stopping all ships coming in. And they had some token stoppages of ships, but never a really serious one. But the Russians got the message. There was some negotiation behind the scene, but it was a close-run thing. It was really dangerous. And unbeknownst to the Americans, the 3 Russian submarines were actually armed with nuclear torpedoes and orders to shoot.
Wow.
And we all owe our lives to one Russian. One Russian. And he was actually the political officer on the boat. I'll have you know. The bad guy in the movies? The bad guy in the movies actually stopped mankind from being wiped out because some of his friends had died on a nuclear U-boat. A Russian submarine, and they died because of a nuclear reaction problem. And he didn't want to see any of that, so he kept this captain from firing. So it's important that people should know that there is such a thing as an honorable enemy, and that Russian was an honorable enemy. And he kept the world from disappearing into World War III. Him, man alone.
Amazing.
And that was the Cuban Missile Crisis of 1962, and you know, it's burnt into my soul because I was so scared of all of that when I was 9 years old.
Yeah.
Not even 9. I was 8 and a bit.
Yeah. Well, you're an old fart like me. In fact, I think you're a little bit older than me.
Yeah, you know, I'm talking to kids here. You know, you got to understand that there was a time when you were just a twinkle in your dad's eye, and I was already running around.
Now, carry on with your growing up in South Africa, Harry.
Okay, so, that's pretty much it. I grew up in a typical Afrikaans household. My grandfather was a farming manager for 2 Jewish brothers who had fled from Stalin. And the farm was at Middelburg Cape, so we would go up there every now and then. And my grandfather one day pointed to the southeast, and he said, I asked him about why are all the clouds there, and he says, God's making it rain on the black country. And I asked him, what does that mean? He says, well, that's the country of the black people. Okay? And I remember he said, we leave them alone there. That's their country. We leave them alone. He said it with such clear and almost Christian authority, you know, and he was referring to the Transkei.
Right.
And so in his mind, the Transkei was the Xhosa's country, and we don't mess with them. And many years later, many, like 50 years later, when I did all my research for this book that we should at some point get to, I ran into that thing again, in that the old Boere of the late 1700s and early 1800s, they were repeatedly telling the Brits, leave those folks alone. That's their country. Don't mess with them. Don't mess with them. Don't mess with them. You know? But it's like the Brits just didn't want to know. They had to have that part of the world.
Yeah. Now,
Anyway, so I grew up with that calibration, and probably one of the little events that you would find amusing is that one day, as we took the car to drive north, we got just outside Port Elizabeth at a sort of a flat country that's covered in sheerveld, and it's known as Nanaga. We got to, or just before Nanaga, suddenly a bunch of black men jumped out of the bush next to the road. They were painted white from head to toe. They had knopkieries in their hands. They made a lot of noise and they went nuts there next to the road. Okay, I was scared to death and my father burst out laughing. And I couldn't understand. There were these white painted apparent savages coming at the car and waving sticks and going nuts, and my dad's laughing, you know. And while I'm still looking over my shoulder at the scary business behind, he explained, that these were young Amakaza men who were going through the initiation period.
right, right.
Okay. Abakweta, some people call them Makweta, or Amakweta, Abakweta. Okay, so in those days, the whole Abakweta process still ran right outside Port Elizabeth. Okay, but that put the fear of death into me, man. I was just a handful of years old and seeing all these guys, next to the road with knopkieries and painted white.
Yeah.
Looked
You
something
know
incredible.
what's so interesting, Harry, is that I was in Kenya in 2016, and the
Mm-hmm.
Maasai do exactly the same. They have the initiation ceremony. The young men are painted, when they're going through the ceremony and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
It's really interesting.
The other thing that came with it is I discovered later that there's a second phase where they're allowed to go to town and meet with people and all that kind of stuff, but then they have to paint their faces with ochre. So there's a red face period involved in all of this.
Okay.
And the one thing that is uniformly true is the young men with the red painted faces were the respectful, well-behaved ones.
Right. Now,
The young Xhosa men with the red painted initiation faces were the respectful ones who showed respect to other people.
yeah, yeah. How things have changed. Now, before we get onto your book, Amabulu,
Yeah. Yeah.
let me ask you how you actually came to write that book. And I also need to ask you, do you, like me, have a huge library of old books about Africa?
Let me do that in reverse order. I do not have a huge library of printed books. I mean, there's a big row behind me. It goes on about 3 times as long as what you see there.
Right.
But that's hardly a huge library. What I do have is a massive repository on disk and
Okay.
online of just an enormous number of old books. Because there are wonderful resources online for doing research. And when I wrote this book, I relied on that extensively. I mean, I even have books from the 1600s listing the names of Dutch guys that were slaves in Algiers.
Wow.
Okay. And that plays a role later in my book because a family friend back in the 1600s was captured by the Moors and taken to Algiers as a slave. Never saw him again.
Wow.
But it goes back all the way to there. I got all that stuff,
Yeah. I did it the hard way. I used to get on the internet and find the book that I was missing and buy it and then read the thing. And you know what I found extraordinary that people don't realize is that you can or even on digitally you get a book and you read the book and there's only one paragraph in the whole book that becomes relevant to what you're doing, and you then you build that into your book when we're talking about the old history in the books.
But there's something fascinating about this, and maybe I should mention that out of the context of the book. So part of the book has to do with tracing my ancestors, so as to create real characters for the real truthful history of the real truthful South Africa.
Right.
There's too much junk about South Africa, and nobody needed another a novel, and nobody needed fiction. I thought it was time for the truth. And you can't fill a book about the truth, you can't fill it with fictitious characters. So I did that research. Now, the way that having a large number of books comes into it is that I was doing homework on old Johannes van der Kemp, the London Missionary Society guy who started the show in South Africa. And he was traveling to go and live with King Gaika of the Amakhoza. And when he got to where Prince Albert now is, in the Karoo, just behind the Swartberg, they stopped for the night, made a fire, and he explains, and this is Van der Kemp, nothing to do with my family. I'm reading Van der Kemp, right? He says a gentleman steps out of into the firelight, introduces himself as Wahlstrand, 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 very Swedish kind of name. All those people ending with strand tend to be Swedes. Anyway, Wahlstrand, and that he is the court messenger of Graaf Reinet on his way to the Cape with the important messages. And he then explains that he was a survivor of the, the shipwreck. I forget now what the ship was called, the Centaur or something. I forget the ship's name, but it's an American ship that broke up on the coast of Xhosa country. They then made their way overland and were rescued by one of my ancestors and helped to the Cape with his wagon. And the captain mentioned that one of his men, a Swede, elected to stay behind in the country. And that is how I found out that my Wahlstrand family was actually a Swede that ended up in a shipwreck on the Xhosa coast.
Wow.
So by having that collection of books, you repeatedly, accidentally stumble over stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
That wasn't supposed to be connected, and lo and behold, there it is. You find your own ancestor stepping into a meeting around a fire out of nowhere, unannounced. Just, hello, I'm Wahlstrand.
Right. Now, Harry, before we talk about your book, we'll be talking about that next. So I just want to tell everybody in the side chat who's watching that we're going to be talking shortly about the actual factual history of early South Africa, the land issue, what's happening in South Africa today. We're coming to that very, very shortly. But before we do, tell us what your book Amabulo is about and why you call South Africa the second America.
Okay, the book is really, it started because I was active on a website about cochlear implants, of all things, because my son is profoundly hard of hearing. I wanted to find out more about that. They had a forum going. I joined the forum. Very helpful guys, all of that. One day I commented about the latest farm murder in South Africa and how outrageous it was. We're now back in about 2005, right?
Right.
So they asked me to say more about it, and I explained. And then some smart-ass Dutchman, calling himself Cloggy, came up with a comment, "Yes, Harry, but you should explain to folks here what happened before." Now, you know what he's getting at. He's trying to say, yeah, well, apartheid, blah, 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 blah.
Right.
And to the everlasting credit of the Americans on that website, almost as one man they reacted, and quite strongly, saying nothing on earth and nothing in history justifies what's happening.
Yeah.
And I thought it was so fantastic that a group of people, not South African, would purely on a basis of morality simply say nothing justifies this. I thanked them for that, and I told them, boys, but maybe Cloggie's right. Maybe I should explain what happened before, but would it be okay if I started at the beginning? And they all said, yeah, that'd be interesting. And I said, well, it's going to take a while because I'm going to start in 1652. And so, over a period of some weeks, writing a section a night, I created the story of the history of South Africa and how things got to be the way they are. And they asked me, so where's the book you're getting this from? And I said, there's no such book. This is the history, the way I know it, the way I learned it, and the way I studied it. And they said, Harry, we got to tell you that book has to exist. Okay, go buy a pen and start writing. And I rejected that because I'm a scientist and I do patents for a living and all that kind of stuff. I have a day job.
Yeah.
And then about a year later, what's his name? Poplak. Is it Simon Poplak or something like that? Not a smart-ass South African, mouthed off here in Canada about justifying the farm murders. And that was like waving a red flag to a bull.
Right.
I decided there and then, okay, since no one's doing anything, no one's making a noise, the farmers are just sitting there getting killed. South Africans seem not to be interested. What the hell is going on? Where's everybody's morality? And so I basically grabbed my PC and started writing. And what I was trying to do is I argued that no one could ever understand South Africa unless they understood the history. They have to understand the history to get a grip on this. But how the devil do you keep people's attention for a period of 360-year history? People famously aren't interested in it. And I had written that earlier thing, and I turned it into a PDF, gave it to a Canadian lady at work. She read this lot and she said, Harry, these folks are right. You have to turn it into a book. And those bits about what was happening in your family, you need to focus on that because that's important. That is actually what people are latching onto. They are relating to you. They are relating to what happened to your family. They are relating to these real people that you have sketched. And you're right. They have to be real people. And so the book is the complete history of South Africa up to 2012. I drew a line at 2012. The real history of South Africa with all the evidence you could ever dream of. It's all there. There's all the references are there. All the links are there. All the books are there. You can find them. And I wove through all of this a number of branches of ancestors leading to my wife and myself. So if you wish, my son's ancestors, not all of them, just certain tracks and lines that place those individuals near the areas or at the areas where the big events in history happened. They're really just regular guys, they're ordinary folks. My intention was to say, I am, the 12th generation of desperately ordinary folks who are just trying to make a living in a desperately strange part of the world. By European standards.
Right.
And you're never going to understand us unless you understand what we lived. This is our story. Here's the dry history written for you, and woven through it is the rather more emotional history of one tree of DNA.
Right.
Okay? And it seems to have worked. I've never come across another book of this nature anywhere. I've looked, never found one. And my way of looking at it is that for those outside South Africa, it is the book you need to read to understand. If you don't have what's in that book, you're probably lying. If you open your mouth, you're going to be lying. Because,
I have to tell you the first comment that anyone made tonight when I set up the live stream. The very first comment was from a fellow who said, I have read Amabulu and it is amazing. That was the very first comment that someone made here.
Well, that's very nice to know. Thank you to whoever your name is. I appreciate that. That was 7 years of work in 7 countries, and it felt like 7 tons of tears.
Yeah.
I'm a grown guy with gray hair, and one day when I grow up, I promise I won't cry as much as when I wrote that book.
Yeah. Now, one of the things that I want to talk about with you is the land question. And you sent me some
Yeah.
maps which are absolutely fascinating. The one that I'm going to put up first, and I'd like you to talk about it,
Tell me which one it is.
is the one with the 350 millimeter summer rain.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm going to just put that up on the screen. I hope you guys can see the detail on it. But there's the 350 millimeter rainfall line right there. Now,
Okay.
do you want to explain
Yes.
the importance of that particular line?
Give me a sec. I'm just dragging it around to my screen that's in
Okay.
front of my face. Yeah. It's strange to me because that folks don't seem to know this. That line, obviously, the reality is not a smooth line like that, but it's essentially the 300 and something millimeter, 350 millimeter rainfall line, summer rain. And that means the country to the east of that line is grassy, and the country to that west of that line is not. You basically need that amount of rain. If you go and speak to a farmer, like a grain farmer, they will tell you that wheat will grow where you've got 300 to 350 millimeters of rain. If you don't get that, you're not going to sow wheat. And wheat is just a fancy grass. And you need grass for cattle, and you need cattle for milk. And the indigenous black cultures of Africa, at least south of the Sahara and outside the forests, is based on milk. They are herders. They're cattle herders. All the way from like Uganda down. In Uganda, they still do some agriculture, but as soon as you move away from that south, these guys are herders. That's what they do. They herd cattle. And it takes a special day for them to actually slaughter any of those animals. Mostly, they live off milk and milk-derived products. And that's the culture. Yeah, they sow some millies and stuff like that, corn, which came from two directions, from Jan van Riebeeck, who imported it, and also from the Portuguese. But really, the big deal is the milk. You take their cattle away, those people die. It's really that bad. I'm serious. When with all the cattle stealing that happened in the early Cape, those people faced famine if they lost their cattle. Really, it's bad stuff. It's really serious. So my comment is, but guys, look at that map. There's a warm current on the east coast. The good Lord put it there. There's a cold current on the west coast. I promise you it wasn't apartheid that put it there. It's actually the good Lord that put a cold current there. We white guys had nothing to do with those two currents. They were there. But the consequence of those two currents is that the rainfall is high in the east and much lower in the west. In fact, Cape Town area gets winter rainfall and almost zero droplets in summer. There's more rain along the south coast only because it's orographic, meaning that the mountains push up the clouds and it rains on the seaside of those. And yes, where you have mountains, you can, on the odd day, find there's a towering thundercloud over one that drops an inch of rain there. But fundamentally, on the plains and vlaktes, you're not really going to have significant rain in west of that green line. So the black people could not have been west of that dotted green line. How the hell did they propose to be west of it? Were they going to go through the gorges and deep forests of Knysna to go and unseat the Khoi people there? Were they going to travel through the Karoo where their herd wouldn't have made it? Where would they have gone with this? Yeah, the Khoi had cattle herds, but on a pathetically small scale compared with the blacks, who were far more organized and institutionalized around that stuff. So you don't have to read a newspaper or listen to a radio station or listen to Harry about where the blacks were in South Africa to start with. They were east of that line. They could never have been west of it. They were approaching that line from the northeast. This is not deep. It's simple. It's God given.
Right.
That's the map.
Now,
Oh, and what I showed there, for what it's worth, is you can see I've written in there no surface water, the Kalahari Desert. I put desert in several places. The Karoo is a semi-desert, and the Free State is essentially a winter freezing prairie. The northern part of it, towards Joburg, is at 6,000 feet. And this is important if there's an American or a Canadian listening to you at the moment, is that yes, South Africa has prairie country. The people are even like the folks on the prairie in the US and Canada. Okay? They behave the same way. They got basically the same church. And as I've said elsewhere, even if sometimes the English isn't great, they can speak Massey Ferguson and John Deere. Yeah, and they understand about seed, and they understand about drought, and they understand about having to maintain a mortgage and find a loan for the next year for all that stuff. And they know what happens, when the harvest is messed up by something like a drought. They speak the same language. That's prairie country. That is the food basket of South Africa.
right. Now, the other thing we need to talk about, and okay, before we do talk about that, what you're saying in effect is that anything east of that line, there was no African settlement.
No, anything west of that line.
Sorry, everything west of that line.
Yeah, and on
where
the
it says
east,
desert and semi-desert, yeah.
but in the east, they weren't originally there. Let
Right.
me repeat, they were not originally there. I have the books gathered by Thiel covering Vasco da Gama's journey and some of the guys who followed. He also captured the shipwrecks of at least 3 different Portuguese ships and people that then walked from where the shipwrecks were. One of them was at Port Elizabeth. Another one was further up the coast, for example. And their descriptions are contained in those books, and it was quite clear that the coast from Port Elizabeth to beyond East London and quite a bit further north was clearly Khoi territory. There's no doubt about it.
Right.
And if anybody wants to argue about that, bring me any Xhosa man and let him come and explain to me why the important river is called the Khai, and the one just to the south of it is the Kaiskama. Those are not Xhosa words.
Right. Now we know from from history that the Grahamstown was basically like the border town for the white settlers and the Xhosa, and that's why you had the Xhosa wars there.
The Fish River runs just east, well, a couple of miles east of town. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But that if we use it like a spot people know, like Grahamstown, that was like the border town.
Yeah, on that map you have up on the screen, you can see the Fish River in blue, and just underneath the bend you can see Grahamstown written there.
Right. Now, what's interesting is I studied the Griqua in great detail, and they were basically a mix of the Khoi and the early settlers. They had coloured blood.
Correct.
And they moved up basically through the desert to a point just north of the Orange River called Klaarwater, where they first set up a settlement.
That's right.
That was in the desert area just to the west of that green 350 millimeter line. And then they moved to Griqua town, which was really the first main town ever established north of the Orange River in South Africa.
You're talking about roughly the Douglas area and those places a little bit further north.
Yeah, it's near Campbell and Kimberley, further to the east.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
okay.
And, they didn't come across any Bantu people at all. But during there were none at all, and they walked right through that area.
The reason is actually on this map. The black people that they were going to run into were the interior black folks, like the Tswana, the Sotho, the Venda, and so forth.
Right.
The coastal guys, I drew in the coastal guys there. I just said Nguni, but everybody knows there's a whole string of them, starting from the bottom, the south. They'd be the Xhosa, the Tembu, the Pondomise, the Zulu, the Swazi, Shanga, and so you can go up the coast, right?
Right.
Now, they're a very different people, linguistically different and so forth from those of the interior. The people in the interior came really as two prongs, of which one prong divided in two. The Tswana and the Sotho people are closely related.
I'm just going to put up that map with the, it's before Mfakani. You know that map?
Yeah, just hold a sec before you do. I need
okay.
this map for what I'm explaining.
Right.
Now, if you follow the Tswana line, you'll see where that arrowhead goes, just south of Vryburg.
Put that up again. Yep, there you go. Okay, here's the Tswana line here.
Yeah, you see where that brown arrowhead goes?
Yeah.
It doesn't show on this map, but the southernmost point that the Tswana people ever got to was Taung, 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 the place of the famous skull, the Taung skull.
Right.
That was the southern limit of the Tswana people. And when the northernmost Khoi people, who did not really come from the Cape, were the Kurana. And the Kurana are still in that world just south of Taung today.
Right.
You'll still find them. You also find them around Kimberley. Okay. That is why the mountain just west of Kuruman is called the Kuranaberg.
Right.
And that's not the only Kuranaberg. A group of them fled from the Matabele in the west, and they fled to the protection of the Sothos in the Basutoland area. And there they settled at yet again a place called Kuranaberg. A small group settled there. And although I can't quite prove it, I have a suspicion that it was them who caused Pieter Retief to be murdered. But okay, that's a long story.
Right.
Now, if we could move to the map that shows where the Griquas were, that'll clarify.
Okay, let me just get that loaded up and ready. I've just got to expand it a bit, otherwise the text is lost.
Small.
Yeah. Okay, there we go. I think that should work. Let me just put that up. Okay, there you go. It's up.
Okay, so it says before Mfakani.
Yeah.
So I got to turn around again and load it from where I can see it.
Now, while you're doing that, this is where Adam Koch, the leader of the Griquas at Griqua Town, was stationed, just north of the Orange River. And then they came through in the early 1820s into the Free State when they fractured into two different groups. And that's the group you can see coming here to the east, right on the line of the 350 millimeter line.
So what I've drawn on that map is the formal boundary of the Cape Colony in 1829 under British control. And you'll see there, near the coast, the Fish River was the border. And then north of the Fish River, the area that we know today is the Tarka. That's the bit to the east of the Fish River there, the pink bit. And then you go up further north to the Orange. Across the Orange River were these two groups of Griqua.
Yeah.
And Philippopolis, it would be the eastern one.
Yeah, and then Philippopolis is right near the Lesotho border. It's sort of not too close to these, but it's right on the east side.
It's still west of Colesberg.
Yeah.
You drive northwest from Colesberg
I've stayed at Philippopolis. They've got an old jail there, and it's got a ghost. I have to tell you a story about this very quickly. Back in 2007, I stayed at Philippopolis, and I booked into the jail because it was a B&B.
And you felt right at home.
Well, let me tell you what happened. This is absolutely freaky. To get to my little cell, because I actually spent the night in a cell on a little bed, and to get to my cell, I had to unlock the main quarters locked door, And that took, before I even got there, I had to actually lock the main gate of the prison because I was the only person staying at the B&B. Then I had to go and unlock the main quarters where the cells were and then lock that again behind me. And then finally, I had to go and lock my own cell to lock myself inside the room that I was going to sleep in.
Okay, so you had to lock yourself inside a haunted jail, is that right?
Well, I'm coming to that. No one told me it was haunted. And this is fact. What happened, and it was incredibly creepy. You can imagine this. Here you are, you're behind 3 locks, starting with the main gate coming into the prison. Nobody else is in the place. And I'm sitting on my bed, actually working on the photos I'd taken earlier that day, and I had my little light on next to the bed. Absolutely quiet. You know, Philippolis is a small town, and there I was working. All you could hear was my fingers on the keys, and all of a sudden, this is about 11:30 p.m. at night. All of a sudden, I heard footsteps going backwards and forwards along the corridor right outside my cell, and they were footsteps.
Yeah.
And I freaked. I can tell you, I just froze. And when the footsteps went down to the bottom end of the corridor, I turned my light off and I put my head under my pillow and I just tried to shut out the noise. I didn't sleep that night. But when I got up the next morning, because obviously when daylight came, whatever it was went away. But when I got up the next morning, I went to see the guy at the local, like a newsagent, and I told him my experience. Yeah. And he laughed. He said, "Oh, didn't they tell you about the ghost in the old jail?" So, if anyone in South Africa wants to have a creepy experience, go to Philippolis and book in to the B&B, which is the old jail, and I'll tell you what, I would never go and stay there again. Sorry, back to you, Harry.
Yeah, they could also go to Craddock, book into the B&B operation for the Dorpshuise, and specifically ask for the Lion House. Believe me, I was there, and yeah, I better not say anything further. I am a skeptical physicist trained to not believe junk.
So what was the junk that you experienced?
I walked into a room, my soul froze, and I walked out of it, and I shut the door, and I kept my family out of there. My wife was with me at the time. We didn't even have to speak. We both said the same thing. No, we didn't hear anything. Whatever it was, didn't need to speak.
Wow, you could feel it.
Oh, good Lord. I'd never experienced anything like it in my life. It's like your soul turning to ice in your body.
Ah.
Okay.
Let's get back to...
Right. So, having discussed the jail at Philippolis and the Lion House in Craddock, now a lot of people are going to go there. Watch this. And we know where the Kuranas are. I've painted them in there.
Yeah,
and you can see the Tlaping, were the southernmost Tswana people there. And the Tlaping are important because that's the group with whom Robert Moffat was the missionary, and Robert Moffat was... Yeah, he was the father-in-law of...
David Livingstone.
David Livingstone, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Our amazing hero who converted only one guy ever, who turns out to be ultimately a slave trader. What an achievement. Okay. So when you look at that map, you see a sort of a grayish brownish, I don't know what color it shows on your screen, but that's the area of the Sotho Tswana people. I painted them as one grouping. So it's a patchwork that stretches from the Kalahari into the northern Transvaal and into the northeast Free State. That part of the world had Sotho Tswana people.
Right.
It's only later that those languages really separated and that they developed somewhat different cultures. If you ask the Sotho people, they will tell you that their ancestors came out of a cave in the ground in the northern Free State. That's the story of the nation. But in reality, they're an offshoot of the greater Tswana peoples. Okay. The interesting bit is you see a little green patch in the Transvaal and it says Ndebele.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Those are the South Ndebele people, the ones where the ladies stretch their necks with rings and they such great masons and they have these great angular paintings on things.
Right.
That's them. Not a big nation, a rather small nation. But I painted them in green because they are related to the original inhabitants of Natal. So are the Swazi and the Shlubi. The Swazi, Ndebele, and Shlubi are among the earliest inhabitants of that part of the world.
Right.
The Zulu and these other guys are newcomers. The Xhosa, the Zulu, the Pondu, Pondomise, all those are newcomers. The Shlubi, the Ndebele, the Swazi, they're the old guys. Okay?
Right.
So you can see there the different Nguni nations stretched out along the coast. But the thing I want to get to is right in the north. You see the Venda, right?
Yep.
Now, the folks who know the northern Transvaal know that the Venda live in the wet country against the slopes of the mountains there, and then some of them spread out a little bit into the flat country, which is rather dry. It's dry, hot, tropical.
Yeah.
But the mountain country is beautiful. I'll have you know that you can have this authenticated by the missionary writings and all that stuff, the people who were there and should know.
Well,
I
can authenticate it as a historian as well.
That served with the Venda. The Venda people arrived in that part of the world round about 1660. So let me translate that for you into political terms. Dear Mr. Ramaphosa, next time that you say all the trouble started in 1652, you may be correct, because that's when you people arrived.
Yeah.
You got that straight, Mr. Ramaphosa? Please, go ask your tribal elders, okay?
When did people like the Zulu and the Xhosa first come into what is now South Africa?
There were black people for sure in Mozambique when Da Gama sailed the coast. That's where he met black people for the first time. He could see activity like animals, I believe, like cattle, in the Natal area. But he sailed all the way up that coast to the Mtamvuna River, basically the southern border of Natal. From there he went east. And all the way that he sailed along the South African coast until he turned away from it, the people they saw were Khoi, not black.
Right.
Okay, and again, you don't have to believe me. Read their own diaries, for heaven's sake.
So what we're saying with this map is that 350 millimeter line that you've got, that we showed originally, is basically confirmed by where you see the settlement of the Bantu and Nguni peoples.
Yeah. They were moving along territory that could sustain their cattle, and they had not reached the limit yet.
Right.
Okay, and the reason why the Suurveld east of PE became such a big deal is because it was kind of the last grassy patch on the way west. If they went beyond Port Elizabeth, they would have hit forest. You can't keep cattle there.
Right.
So they could still progress along the coast, but along the interior, I mean, if you go look at the Tarka, you can keep cattle in the Tarka, and the farmers do keep cattle there, but it's really marginal. It's not like the Transkei, where you can just pretty much put your cattle anywhere. Okay, so the reality...
The date of this is... Harry, the date of this is 1829, isn't it?
Yeah, so this is pretty late on in history. That's why you're seeing them there.
Okay, so what we're saying is that in 1829, there wasn't one Bantu or Nguni person living west of that 350 millimeter line in South Africa. And by then, the Cape Colony had been totally settled by the white population.
Yeah, there may have been the odd one that settled with a farmer to work as a
Right.
farmhand or something, but as nations, no, they were distinctly east of the Fish River. And there was a whole commotion with that War of 1811, which was the Fourth Frontier War.
Right.
That was a big deal. The Xhosa were pushed back across the fish because they had crossed the fish. They were pushed all the way back across the Keiskamma because if you go check in the 1770s, they had not crossed the Keiskamma. They had not crossed it. And then suddenly all kinds of troubles erupted and they crossed the river. And the reality is that they were more scared of Gaika and his power than what they were afraid of the Boere on the border. They were happier to clash with the handful of Afrikaners on that frontier. They were happier to have that clash than to have like a 5,000 dead war with Gaika, like they did have later.
Right.
So these guys, these coastal guys, I mean, right along the coast, the Suurveld Xhosa, as they were called, the Amagulukwebe, Amatinde, those guys who caused so much mayhem along that coast. They were the enemy of both the farmers and the proper Chagabek Xhosa in the mountains. The Boere always had good relations with the Chagabek, Gaika and his people.
Right.
Okay, it's these other guys who were all kinds of right-hand and left-hand houses. I don't think we have time for me to go into the houses of the Xhosa.
Sure.
But in a nutshell, a king might have 7 sons. One of those sons would be the son of the number one wife. He would become the next king. He would inherit his father's dominion. The others would have to go off and find country for themselves. So now you can see why these people spread like this. It was an effort that caused other peoples to be driven out, and they were occupying more and more and more land and invading as far as they were going. So the reason for the spread of these people is in that what the hell is the fancy word for how one king replaced another? Succession. It's a succession plan
Right.
of the Xhosa royal houses that caused the spread of all of this.
Okay, now
And
are we ready to go to the next map with the
Yeah,
Mfecane?
go for it.
Okay. Now, what I'm putting on, guys, is the results of the Zulu Mfecane, where they basically, well, I'll let you talk about it.
Yeah,
Harry.
just before we go, can I just
Yeah.
point out
Go ahead.
something on the map that you hopefully still have in front of you?
The previous one?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll put that back up again. Yeah, got it.
Sorry, I'm messing you around,
That's
but
okay.
just look at that white patch in the southern Free State. Basically, from
Yeah.
the Vaal River, along the Vaal, Vet, and Modder rivers. That's the southern Free State below, basically below Bloemfontein, okay?
Right.
You see that?
Yep.
That was not occupied. Can I repeat? That was not occupied. There were no black people there.
And I
Period.
can tell you, Harry, that my research into the Griqua confirms that, because when Adam Koch III came into that area, and they basically handed out these tracts of land to the Griqua in the southern part of the Free State and
Yeah.
going right up to Bloemfontein. There were no, obviously on the east coast where the Sotho were, they had issues because there were blacks there, but
Yes,
the rest
there
of
were.
the area was totally vacant. Yeah.
You'll see I made a patch there for the Sotho.
Yeah.
I should just point out that the Sotho have kind of misappropriated their own name, because all of those peoples are strictly speaking Sotho people. The Tswana are a kind of Sotho people, but somehow only the very far south Sotho have taken the name Sotho, and the other have stuck with their individual tribal names. So
Right.
you have the Tlaping, the Rulong, the Kwena, the Grutsi, the Rulong, the Taung, the Tlokwa, etc. But the Sotho have kept the common denominator name.
Right.
Okay?
Now, tell me when you're ready to go to the
I
Mfecane.
am. I'll shut up now. Go to the next one.
Okay, here we go. Okay, I'll pull up the Mfecane map. Okay, just this arrow here is pointing to Mzilikazi's no man's land, just so you know that. Okay, I'm going to zoom in so that you can actually get the detail, guys. Now, nothing really is happening in the white occupied Cape Colony area. This is, what year is this now, Harry, that we're looking at now?
The Mfecane, strictly speaking, we should see as starting in 1816 and a kind of rumbling on heavily through the 1820s, running down in the 1830s down to 1836.
Right. Okay, so let's concentrate on the two or the areas that where the
Heavily
populations
affected.
were devastated. We'll start with Mzilikazi's no man's land, right at the north.
Yeah. So Mzilikazi, of course, was he was a prince in the Zulu world. Fell out with Chaka, and then went off with his people. He first made common cause with the Ndebele. And it's obvious that it should be Ndebele because they're vaguely similar people. The Ndebele speak a Nguni-derived language. But then he moved west, and he devastated the central and southern Transvaal and portions of the northern Free State and into what would later be the North Cape. So that whole blue-grey area became his no man's land, while his actual settlement was there where I drew him on the Mariko River.
Yeah, Mzilikazi. So he basically cleared out the African population through much of the
absolutely.
Transvaal.
And you know, I've written a number of articles. There's a series that I developed called "Who Stole the Land?"
Yeah.
And I'm pretty sure if you put those words into Google, you'll find my set of articles. And it goes into this in detail. You can go to bed with these things and keep reading and learn something about your own country. So along the coast, there was Dingaan, who, of course, murdered Chaka and took over. And the no man's land that he inherited, I've labeled it there, the grey thing, and that is Shaka's no man's land.
Yeah.
So you can see he just wiped out the place all the way to the Humza-Mvubu, which is south of Natal, okay? And then up all the way to the present-day Mozambique and up to the Drakensberg Mountains.
Well, I'll tell you a very interesting story, which is, again, related to the Griqua. When the Great Trek happened and they went through Griqua territory, which was then the Free State, which is today the Free State, basically the Griqua and the Boers were not compatible. And the Griqua were basically given their marching orders. And I've forgotten who the British governor at the time was. Oh my gosh. Do you recall who the British governor was? Who
wasn't it Harry Smith?
No.
Which event are you talking about?
Okay. What happened was that the Griqua were forced out of the Free State, and they moved after a couple of years in about 1848, 1849 through Lesotho, down the Ongeluksness Pass into this area here, which became East Griqualand. Yeah. Because the British governor said there was no one living there, and there was no one living there because of what had happened years before.
Yeah. Well, the you see there, I still show the unoccupied spot there in the Free State.
Yeah.
Notice the name Makwana.
Yeah.
Okay, that was the old town chief who was still holding out there. Morocco, a little bit further down. His people came from the north and they fled under the leadership of a missionary to go settle. I'm sorry. To go settle at Tabanshu.
Right.
And Lepui was a Tlaping guy who settled with a French missionary at what would later become Batuli. So all you had was these little individual spots where people were living with missionaries, except for Makwana, who didn't have a missionary.
Right.
And this pretty much was the situation when the Mfecane had run its course. But you should know that the missionaries who traveled that part of the world in the wake of Mzilikazi, I have their descriptions of cannibalism. I have their descriptions of how they found two women sitting around a pot cooking a human leg and all that
Oh,
kind of stuff.
yeah.
It's all there. They were reduced to that. Okay.
Ah,
So this is not fiction. This is not an apartheid story. These are the much loved British missionaries who wrote this stuff, and I have it in detail, and it's
yeah.
all in those articles for you to read.
Yeah.
Okay. And this is why I'm saying that the one reason for the book, and I didn't get to make that point, is that if I could find a way of getting these all printed up for free and loaded on a boat, I would ship one to every person in South Africa to keep under his Bible or next to his bed, because the book is the full defense of the white man's existence in South Africa. You cannot defend yourself against the world without knowing what's written there.
Right.
Okay, it is your battle plan, it is your defense, it is the basis for why you are who you are, where you are. It's all there. It's time to lift your heads up, be proud of who you are, and find out.
And get the facts.
Okay.
That's
Get the
what
facts.
that's where, and we'll
Get the
be talking
facts.
about expropriation in a minute, but I just want to get the history right. Now, I've got another map,
so that's
which
it.
is the one where he shows trekkers, one from Mzilikazi in 1837, etc. Are you ready to go to that one?
After Great Trek, yeah, I just got to load them up behind my back, which
Okay.
breaks my neck every time.
Okay, I'll just we'll just concentrate on the southern area first, because that's obviously where they first occupied the. We're talking about the fur trekkers. Okay, I'll just get that
Right.
map up. Okay, there we are. Got it up now.
So now you see the northeastern part of the country magnified. And the first bit to look is in the middle of the Free State. It says trekkers purchased from Makwana.
Yeah, 1836.
Hendrik Potgieter bought that from Chief Makwana. And Makwana said, okay, I'll sell you this land in exchange for a certain number of head of cattle and protection from Mtsilikazi. Let me say that again. He bought it from Makwana. He bought it in exchange for cattle and for protection from Mtsilikazi.
Right.
Okay.
Now that's the area that goes right up to the Vaal River in the north.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Then came the battles with Mtsilikazi, 1836 and 1837, where the trekkers, I guess you could say, won the battles, but initially lost the war because they lost all their cattle. They were helped, and this must stand on record. We are honorable people, and we should always honor Morocco's people down in the South Free State. Why? Because when those trekkers were stuck after Vegkop, they had no cattle, they had no draft oxen, nothing. They were going to starve to death. It is Morocco who sent help and brought them back to where he was, gave them food to eat, gave them milk to drink, okay, and then gave them soldiers to go and help fight against Mtsilikazi. Today, nobody wants to know that history. It is important that history be known, because even in the homeland days, the old apartheid homeland days, there was a little patch of Maputa Tswana there at Tabanshu, because those people are Tswanas and they were respected for helping our ancestors, and we should always respect them for that.
Right. Now,
Okay.
just for perspective, Pretoria is basically located where 1837 is, where one from Mzilikazi.
Yes.
Okay.
So
and then
in the
so it
battles
goes
from
slightly to the east of that.
So the trekkers actually then won that territory from Mtsilikazi. Mtsilikazi had denuded it.
Right.
Okay, so when they beat him, he fled into Matabele land north of the Limpopo. And by the way, became a very friendly neighbor to the Boere of the Transvaal. There was never it's just like with the Zulu. There was never a fight between the Zulu and the Afrikaners again, and there was never a fight between Silkats and the Afrikaners again. The two lots respected each other and each other's territory, and that's just the way it should be. And then came the colonial Brits.
Yeah. Well, that's another story.
Kick the
Okay.
whole can over. Okay.
Let's move into the east side, where we've got trekkers, one from Dingaan.
Yeah.
And-
So
yeah.
So the lower part where you below Massacre there, that's the southern Natal area. That's the deal that was made with Dingaan, which he killed them rather than go through with it. And when they eventually defeated him, they found that contract and they enacted that contract and said it was legitimately bought. And that's the patch that you see there. North of the river, north of the Tugela River,
yeah,
is the bit that was won in the later battle with Dingaan, which, again, to be honest, it's mostly Panda's people who did the fighting. The Boere went with. Some of the fighting was done by the Boere, but it was mostly a Zulu versus Zulu thing. Okay? They made his kingdom of Zululand. They wanted authority over it, but he would be left alone to run the place as king. And that's it. So you see it there, his kingdom formally recognized, but they treated it as they had authority over that part of the world, but they didn't really want to have anything to do with it.
Okay, so now we're talking about let's say the 1840s, around there. At that
Correct.
time, if I just go out of the map a bit, the only place that the Bantu actually had were down near the Fish River, where the Xhosa
Yes.
were and the Pondo were.
Yes.
The kingdom on the northern part of
The
KwaZulu-Natal
Sothos,
today, and the Indabele right up in the north.
Yeah.
Then you had the Venda and the Songa right up again in the north.
And you have the Tlaping in the west. The Tswana, the Rolong and the Tlaping.
Oh yeah, the Rolong and the Tlaping in the west, and then of course the Lesotho, where is Lesotho today. So
Yeah.
the rest of South Africa, as we look at it, was basically occupied by white settlers.
Yes.
And what Ramaphosa is suggesting is that this land has been stolen from the Bantu and Nguni people.
I'd like to understand how it works. In what book in international law does it say that when black people conquer a piece of territory, it is theirs, and when white people conquer a piece of territory, it's definitely not theirs? Need to understand that bit, please.
Yeah, there's certainly double standards when it comes to that. All right. Now, that's a bit of the history lesson, guys. I'm going to now talk to you about some more specific things, Harry, so we can actually get this into perspective.
Yeah.
Okay. Firstly, how do you see the present South Africa as a country?
Yeah. What can I say? I wrote some notes here that says, from a continental economic powerhouse to a failed bankrupt African banana republic with a brazenly racist government, wasting its international honeymoon, budding warlords, and endemic corruption. If you're not corrupt, you're not welcome. The whites are divided, or were divided until a month ago. Many were absolutely apathetic, even more just in simple denial. And I accuse some of being in Stockholm syndrome. It's like, this is not happening. I'll just side with the winner. It's extremely upsetting to watch from outside. It's extremely upsetting. And the first time I got any hope was now in the last while with the Senekal events that, finally, someone actually did something. You have no idea how demoralizing this all looks from outside. When I try to explain to Americans who are trying to help, they kind of want to know from me, Harry, but when we look over there, it doesn't look like any of these white folks actually worry about this. It's just you that's worried about it. Why aren't they doing anything? Why are they just sitting there? And that's a constant thing that I get. Why are they just sitting there? Quickly followed by, well, why don't they go back to Europe? And then I have to explain, but they can't. They haven't had a right to return to Europe since 1814.
Well, the way they've been labeled by the mainstream media internationally is just absolutely disgusting.
Yeah. So
as racist, and I found it very disturbing, and if I can talk about Brackenfell, where every single time you saw the EFF, they were saying these racist whites, these racist whites, these racist whites. That was their mantra. And the problem is if you say it enough, and the media keep on publishing this, like Anchor and SABC, which is run by the ANC, people outside are going to start believing it. And this is where there is an incredible misnomer. What are your thoughts on that, Harry?
Well, first, the people outside the country. The West is highly educated, and the interesting thing about highly educated people is that they never want to believe that they're indoctrinated. And the more highly trained they are, the less they believe they've been indoctrinated. So they're actually very easy to fool and very easy to mislead because they're so educated. You will not pull that stunt with a regular hardworking farmer.
Yeah. But don't you think that political correctness has just taken over, and people are so scared to speak their minds now in case they get called the R word?
It is true. South Africans also use the term political correctness, but I would put it to you that rank and file South Africans do not understand the world overseas at all.
Yeah.
They don't understand the torrent of misleading information these people are subjected to. They don't understand how people outside South Africa are being shamed for being white. They don't understand how people are being shamed for being Christian. They don't understand the attack that these people are under all the time. And then the same people who do the shaming point at the folks in South Africa and blame them as the sort of pivotal point of racism on the planet. I don't think South Africans understand that they have been painted as the devil at the core of hell.
Yeah, I think that
I don't understand it.
Yeah, that is the problem, that it's the mainstream media again. I mean, they are just so dishonest. They're fake news. I just can't get over it.
Okay, you should see what it is that the New York Times said about Senekal. It was like people who wanted the old South Africa apartheid, the nostalgic for apartheid, up against people who demand land. That's how the EFF versus the guys in the town were painted.
Well, there was a white paper in the UK that actually had the words white thugs when it came to Senekal.
Yeah.
And it was just quite extraordinary. And we actually reported on this on the Loving Life channel. And as a result, several of the people who viewed the article wrote to the editor and complained and said, look, if you want the full story, you've got to go and have a look at these videos where you can see what actually happened. And so they then changed that from white thugs to white locals on that article online.
Yeah, I just, some days I get desperate. You know, I've written this article called Senekal or Senekal, and it's on my blog. Just look up, just put the word Amabulu, Amabhulu, Amabulu. It means the Boer people, okay? Ama means people, Bulu is Xhosa corruption of Boere. Amabulu. Just look up that word. There's a H before the U's. Just put it into Google and you'll find all my work. And I've written this article on the subject of Senekal, and when printed out, it's actually 22 pages. It's Senekal from beginning to end.
Right.
And I've made the point that the folks don't speak. And if I could reduce it to my personal frustration, it is that I'm trying so hard. I'm devoting my life here to try and help my people in South Africa. But good Lord, they make it difficult for me.
You know what I'd love to do, Harry?
Yeah.
We're actually going to be moving next year to a different platform off YouTube. And because it's our own website, which is going to have all my archive of over 6,000 videos on it, and it's going to be fully searchable, we're going to have an area where I would love to have your articles carried, because it's like supporting reference material. So with your permission, if you're happy to do that.
I'm happy to do that, absolutely. I mean, as far as I'm concerned, I wrote Amabulu, but my international reason for Amabulu is to create the repository of information that people will have to pick up. When they finished wiping out the white South Africans, that book is going to be alive and it's going to tell them, this is
Right.
what you did, okay? This is what you did. Don't hide now. You know what you did. Here's the truth. It's always been there.
Yeah.
Okay, there's no denying. It's in your face. Here it is. Anyway, my appeal to South Africans, because I know you got a lot of South Africans watching your channel,
Right.
is, guys, as ek nou met oom van Loggenberg en Poggenpoel en wie ook al in die Vrystaat kan praat, really, asseblief, help my. I can't tell Americans about articles written in Afrikaans. It sounds from here, it looks as though the Boere are talking to one another, telling them what just happened. And they're not talking to the world. If they're writing in Afrikaans, ek is Afrikaans, okay. My hele familie is Afrikaans. Asseblief tog help my. Hou op om alles in Afrikaans te doen. Ek kan dit nie gebruik om julle te help verdedig in die buiteland nie. Ek kan dit nie gebruik nie. Folks can't read Afrikaans in America.
Yeah.
When things happen, we know the formal media doesn't report it anymore in South Africa. They don't report all the killings. Okay? But when I find the information I need to convey to the American public, it's in Afrikaans. Why don't they understand? Why don't they understand that I need help in English? Because otherwise they say I've screwed up the translation.
Yeah.
You know, I'm also accused.
Yeah. Look,
So I'm just saying, guys, please behave as though you are part of the world. The world is willing to help, but not if you speak to them in a language they don't understand. Really, seriously.
that's
Okay.
why I think this channel is so important, because we're not only not based in South Africa, so I can report with accuracy and honesty, whereas people who are in alternative media in South Africa have to be so careful what they say, because they'll get someone knocking on their door.
Okay. So we were last at the matter of the expropriation of land, and our time is running out. So there's
Yeah.
something I wanted to get across, and it's some
Please
of the
go ahead.
data about land. So we've talked about what the history says about who stole the land. Okay. If you look at the land that's owned by individual farms or individual white farmers in South Africa, okay,
Yeah.
it's not the 80% that these people say, like CNN. It's 21.8. It's 21.8.
The state owns most of it, doesn't it?
The state owns most of it. It's 21.8. It's not 80%. They are lying. Okay? Now, the way you can do that is to go to the CIA fact book, look up South Africa and get the land surface area. And then you go to this damned CNA's own report about individual farm ownership. And you get the surface area of the individually owned white farms. And the answer is 21.8% when you divide the one number into the other, okay? These things are lies that are being spread, and you guys need to learn how to play the game. I am telling the South African farmers with this, do your own damned numbers. Asseblief tog, okay? Moenie net daar sit nie. Don't just sit there. Do your own numbers. And next time that some smart-ass reporter comes to your farm to ask you why you are white and own so much land, then you quote him, this guy sitting here. Okay? And you can tell him Harry Booyens says, we own 21.8% of the surface area of the country.
And can I just
Don't
add to that, Harry, that most
How's
of
that?
the land that the white farmers own is, you know, it's desert. It's not good
Well, that's
arable
my
land.
next point.
Yeah.
Is if you start looking at what happens when you go to the other when you take out the Karoo, okay? You take out the Karoo. the numbers start dropping drastically. So in the end, it's much less than that 21.8%. And the question that people need to be asking is, the government owns all these homeland territories. Why are the white farmers not allowed to farm there? That's racist.
Yeah.
And why, when these people get clever and say, yeah, but we're talking about farmland. Okay, so let me get this straight. So the homeland areas, which generally have higher rainfall than where the white Boere are, so that's not farmland? So let me understand the concept of farmland, guys. So farmland is called farmland when a white man has spent his blood and his sweat and his money to turn it from bush into farm, or from veld into farm. Once it is then called farm because the farmer has made it a farm, then it becomes something that the EFF wants, right? Do I understand that definition? Are we all together here yet about how that works? You got to watch these people. They play with these numbers, okay?
Yeah.
And I get put on a spot and I get told, yeah, Harry, I hear what you say, but people aren't really meaning all the land surface. They mean arable land. And I'll tell them there is not really arable land in the Karoo. Show me the arable land in the Karoo. I am the descendant of a Karoo farmer. Bring me the arable land.
Now,
Okay?
I'd like to get on to the expropriation without compensation.
But this is the point, that now they want to expropriate land from the 21.8%. What about the 78.2%? What am I missing?
Yeah, I totally get it. And I've just got that map on the screen, which shows the 350 millimeter rain line again. And really the key thing when you hear someone like Julius Malema or Cyril Ramaphosa saying that the whites stole the land from the blacks, you can see what a load of BS they're talking.
They did not steal the land, number one. And number two, the supposed farmland, they made it. These black farmers, there's a reason that Southern Free State didn't have any black people. They couldn't farm there. They didn't know about irrigation. They didn't know about doing dry land farming like that.
Windmills.
They didn't have windmills. I get so upset with this.
Now,
okay.
How do you see the Western secession and the remainder of South Africa?
Well, in my mind, I see an independent, non-racial, secular, democratic state west of a negotiable line, something to do with that rainfall line, wherein the majority demographic is a people with a Western European language, a free enterprise philosophy, a respect for property, and a Western Judeo-Christian value system that respects all religions. In other words, the Muslims of the Cape must be free and happy to do exactly what they want with their religion. Now, that's quite a sentence, but I really think I want to print out that sentence and mail it to everybody in the Western Cape. So whenever they get the question, they read that sentence. You know?
Right.
Don't be coy. Take the sentence. Tell them that you got shipped this and this is what you must say, and you take out your card and you read it. An independent, non-racial, secular, democratic state west of a negotiable line wherein the majority demographic is a people with a Western European language, a free enterprise philosophy, a respect for property, and a Western Judeo-Christian value system that respects all religions.
Yeah.
Because that's something that everybody I know in the West Cape understands, except perhaps the Xhosas that have been bussed in to live there.
Right. Now, yeah, carry on.
Yeah, but then you get left with the rest of the country, and to me, what will be left over of the rest is essentially what I call the People's Democratic Republic of Azania.
What about
So
KwaZulu-Natal? Wouldn't they want to do the same thing?
they can secede and become something decent.
Right.
The Tswanas can secede and become something decent. And as far as I'm concerned, the Boer who feel like that ought to fight like crazy for a 10th province, or what they call now a 10th province, uh, essentially in the Free State and portions of the Transvaal. Okay? My advice to them would be to make sure that that territory is adjacent to the West Cape. Share a border with it. Do not get cut off. Do not make a little blob in the middle of nowhere.
Like
I
the
don't
Ndebele.
don't become a little blob like the Ndebele. Okay? And my argument around that is that um, the Western secession thing has a chance of working. Even the folks who want an Afrikaner homeland in the Free State are now supporting the idea of Western secession. And there are rules to that secession, and I saw people breaking those rules recently. But there are rules, and I think it is attainable. It can be done by staying inside international law and by getting international support, very much along the Kosovo lines. So I think that can be done. I think such a state will also operate as protection for a 10th province on the wrong side of the rainfall line. In other words, if guys want to have a Northern Free State Afrikaner homeland, that thing will have a degree of security by virtue of there being a seceded Western state. Very much along the lines of how Mugabe towed the line as long as South Africa was under white rule. We only went sour afterwards.
Right.
And so I think all of that can be obtained. I think it's doable.
What
but
do you think? What do you think about groups like the ULA and Cape Exit Party and Cape Secession, and the whole number of groups? And
yeah, there's
I
a
think
whole,
the ULA make the point that they are the only ones that really have taken the legal process to secede the area that they are talking about. Now, I'd like just your input on that.
yeah, okay, look, the ULA approached me for some help, and I gave it to the best of my ability. The map that they ultimately went with is not what I proposed. But and you can by comparing my maps, you'll see what I mean. Actually, this might be a good place to, if you could put up the map that is number 11. Sorry, number 12.
Yep, I can do number 12. Let me do that right now.
How about we put that up?
I'll just get that up for you. Yeah, carry on while I'm doing this,
Yeah.
Harry.
So what number 12 does is it shows you a more detailed rainfall line, not that long, smooth, sweeping one. These are maps I put together in the early 2000s already.
Okay, I've got it up now.
And I used the 2002 election, right? I think, or 2002 data, I should say.
Right.
For the distribution of, what do you call them? We call them ridings in Canada, voting districts. So it was the majority people by voting district. So do you see how well that rainfall line corresponds?
Yeah.
With the split between Coloured and Bantu? The Coloured or partly Khoi people living in the drier country and the Bantu living in the grass country.
Right.
It was still true in 2002, for crying out loud, folks. Okay, like I said, this is not designed by me or by apartheid. It's because of the way God makes the rain fall. Okay, so that's the basis of secession for me, right there. And the ANC is desperately trying to ship people into the West. And now the EFF is trying to disrupt the West. Okay. Yes, there can be patches elsewhere, but those patches are only going to be as good as what the holistic Western section is. Their existence will be predicated upon a solid Western secession. If there is no Western secession, the others are going to get laughed off and they're going to be run out of the country. That's how I see it. Now, what needs to happen, and I think we're getting rapidly out of time here, is we must not be seen to instigate or rationalize a civil war in order to earn the right to secede. People must not make statements like, look, if today a civil war breaks out, then that's a basis to secede. That is not true. That will be twisted and warped outside South Africa as the whites created a civil war in order to break away to have an apartheid state. Okay? So don't say that stuff. Don't do that stuff. I'm telling you that the Afrikaner Accord and Section 235 of the Constitution, that part of the Constitution, the only thing that does is it gives me the freedom to have this discussion without being prosecuted. That's all that Clause 235 does, because whatever people want to do, the ANC-dominated parliament has to vote on it, and they're going to say no. So why the hell do people waste their time on Section 235 of the Constitution? It's not going to go anywhere. The ANC is laughing at this. People need to get over that now because they're wasting time. The Afrikaner Accord is not going to get recognized by anyone. Doesn't matter how many Germans or other ambassadorial staff may have been privy to it, it's going to get laughed off. It's simply going to get laughed off. But in the West, you have a population base that is now as pissed off at the ANC as what everyone else is. And I think the West is ready to move. I believe there's a need for momentum in all of this. I think Senegal and to some degree the first days of Brackenfell created a certain momentum. And the way I look at it, and this may sound drastic and dramatic, but my comment is, as I wrote my little notes down here, there should be no quota for the EFF. Don't give them anything. Okay? If you have to block the view of the media and then mess them up, I don't care. But no quarter to the EFF. They need to suffer. Okay? Notice, Mr. Malema, I'm not suggesting they be killed. I'm not suggesting they be burned. Okay? I'm just saying
put back in their place.
They need to be flattened. Okay? I don't care how. At this stage, with what Malema has said and done, I'm happy to look the other way for anything that's done to them. That's the way I look at it. Yeah. Okay? They've overstayed their welcome on humanity. They've simply overstayed their welcome on humanity. Okay? I don't care what happens to them. Just don't tell me about it. Okay. Secondly, no rest for the ANC. Don't give them any rest. Give them a Senegal today. Give them a Brackenfell tomorrow. Okay? Give them a Knysna or a flipping Uppington. I don't care. Just give them one of those every week. Keep them running. Keep them busy. Keep them falling about. It's time they felt pressure. Just keep no rest for the ANC. Don't give the ANC any rest. Keep them running. Okay? Yeah. And number 3, no escape for the DA or the Freedom Front Plus.
What role does the DA play?
There's a precious old English proverb that says, I can't use the word on screen, I'm sure, but what's his name or get off the pot. Okay? And if these two parties keep playing their stupid bloody politics and try to feel good about themselves because they're sitting in Parliament where they're part of the joke.
Honourable
really,
members.
If you think about it, the honourable members.
Okay.
Honourable members. Is the F word acceptable in Parliament? That stuff.
Yeah.
Guys, You need to start understanding. If you are DA and you are the Freedom Front and you're in Parliament, you're part of the problem, guys. Okay? You're not part of the solution. I hope Steen Eisen is listening. You guys are part of the problem, not part of the solution. And if they don't get their asses moving on Western secession, presumably I'm talking to the provincial DA, if they don't get moving on this, someone is going to stand up and give them this time-honored speech. You have sat there too long for any good you have done. Depart, I say, and let us have done with you. In the name of God, go. And those were the words of Amory to Chamberlain after his stupid little exercise with Hitler. Do you know what Hitler actually said about Chamberlain?
What?
I think he said it to Ribbentrop. It's recorded. If I see that pathetic, stupid little man again, I'm going to jump on his umbrella. That's what Hitler said. You're dealing with Hitler-like people. Yeah. You can't be sensible with them. What the hell makes you think you can be sensible and decent and procedural with them?
Yeah.
Okay.
Look, the cultural divide is huge.
Who the hell are these people playing for? I don't understand. So as far as I'm concerned, they got to get off the pot. Okay.
Yeah.
And the reason I'm saying that is because these disparate little groups that call out internet voting and all kinds of stuff like that, that's going to get laughed off over and over and over.
Yeah.
No one's taking any notice, boys. Okay? So stop voting on the internet. Stop making just declarations and writing letters that you know are never going to get responded to.
So you're suggesting people should man up and stand up?
People should man up and stand up, and more particularly the DA and the Freedom Front need to man up and stand up, and they need to make like they actually have some common reason amongst the two groups to stand for something, okay? Because they're being threatened, they're being wiped out by the separation between them. They need to, let me put it this way. If Hein Marx of the ULA and Isaac van Zyl, who's more of a Boerenstaat kind of guy, if those two can get together and decide to do something, I know they have, if they can get together, it's a freaking shame that the DA and the Freedom Front can't get their little cojones to the right size, get together in a room or get on a bloody telephone and for once in their miserable, misbegotten lives, do something together to look like they're representing something in the West. And the reason I'm doing that is because there needs to be something with a political base that negotiates with the ANC so that the record will reflect that the people of the West tried to negotiate with the ANC government in the East and that the negotiations broke down. Then you have a basis for secession with international support. Then you are in line with international law. So, as far as I'm concerned, the concerned people in the Cape need to start grabbing their DA and Freedom Front representatives, and I don't care what they do to them. Walk them behind the schoolyard and go and bang them against the head if you have to, but get them to understand they got to man up, shape up, and start doing this job. Basically, I want the DA and the Freedom Front hijacked to the cause. I don't care how. Okay? I'm running out of life here. I've struggled with this for 20 years. And I've seen the writing on the wall all the way, and I've warned about it. I've written a bloody book about it. And here I sit with Americans around my neck telling me, how can we help? Well, I think the people in South Africa should now grow a pair and start working together and look like they want to do this stuff. And the answer is Western secession as a protection mechanism for also others who want to do the same elsewhere. I am telling you, if the West splits off, the Tswana and the Zulu are next.
Right. Now, I don't know how you're going for time your side, Harry, because we've been going for 2 hours now. But
I'm okay. I've hit high octane.
Good to hear. Now, I think one of the problems is when we look at what's happening in South Africa today, they're the naysayers, you know, amongst the minority group, and I'm talking specifically the white population now, who, especially in the Western Cape, they're kind of suggesting that everything's fine, everything's cool, we don't have to worry, regardless of what happens. Well, how do we actually get them off their big fat asses?
I do not know. But you've got to ask yourself, how the hell did an organization that the CIA said had only 5,000 members get the black population off its asses in the 1980s?
Through violence.
I don't know what it's going to take. Get them off their asses, and get them off their asses now.
Yeah, because we're running out of time, aren't we?
You're running out of time. The people are running out of time. Okay? It's a well-established old Afrikaner thing. Let's just nick around until we have no more time left, and then we'll negotiate from a position of weakness. Damn it, I wish they would stop that.
Yeah.
En ek sê dit as 'n Afrikaner. Hoekom is my mense altyd so? Hoekom?
Yeah. No, look, I get what you're saying, because, you know, just standing there and watching the EFF do what they do is not really getting them to become, you know, more humane. That they're just becoming more violent and more out of control.
And you know, I know folks are going to tell me, yeah, Harry, you had a groot bek, you left the country and you're sitting in Canada and all of that kind of stuff. Okay, boys, so I'm going to say this straight into the camera so you see me well and hear me well. Will those of you who have the guts to stand up, take your family, take them out of the life they know, move them to another country, and start your life over with a bloody pencil in your hand in a corner on a piece of paper, and work yourself up again to be something in life? Those of you with the balls to do that, stand up.
I think a lot of people don't have the money. I think that's the problem.
If you can do that, you can stand up for your country right now. Maybe you don't have to use that pencil and go and crawl like I had to crawl.
Yeah.
So I've had enough of the excuses. I've had enough of, you know, actually this and actually that, and, you know, I'm just sick of it.
I just feel very sad because the minority white group are being played. They're being played by the EFF and the ANC.
It is so clear from where I sit. I'm sure it is from where you sit.
Yeah.
And I so desperately want my people to save themselves, for God's sake. Why can't they just, you know, work together? Now, finally, with the Senekal event, you see people working together who never even wanted to talk to one another.
Right.
So they got to retain that momentum. And that's the word I wrote at the bottom of my little notes here is momentum, momentum, momentum. Retain the momentum.
Yeah. And that means protest, protest, protest.
Yeah. Okay. But you got to do protest that actually gets cameras. You need cameras, guys. Okay. And you need people who can actually talk coherently when the cameras descend. So many of the people I've seen on video the last couple of days are ignoramuses who can't talk for their people. Get people who can talk, please. Please. It's embarrassing to watch sometimes.
Yeah. Okay, guys, if you've got any questions to ask Harry, please drop them in the side chat now. I've been very engrossed with what Harry's saying and putting up maps and stuff, so I might have missed questions, but please put them in now, and we'll run through those.
Okay. People need to bring their A game. What I'm saying is, for God's sakes, guys, we need the A game now. Okay? No more messing around.
Yeah.
Your best game.
Okay, now Winston Young says you left the country because you saw the writing on the wall. You and Scott. There is no hard feelings there. Because I know a lot of people suggests that you and I, Harry, are people who are pariahs because we
Oh, yeah.
left the country, which is BS. Now, the name of the book, Marlena, thank you for putting that in there. It's called Amabulu. Now, the link I've got in there, Harry, is hboysons.wordpress.com
No,
/20.
no, H. Booyens.
Yeah, it's got that. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I'm just shorthanding. And book on Amazon. So they can go there and get a link to the Amazon, can't they?
Easiest way is just put AMABHULU into Google and it'll light up pages and pages of my stuff.
Okay, but what if they want to buy your book?
Amazon.
Just go to Amazon and type in Amabulu.
Just put in Amabulu, and there's only one Amabulu on Amazon.
Right, okay. There you go, guys. That's how you get hold of Harry's book. Harry, is there anything else you'd like to add on this subject? Because we've basically been concentrating on the historical aspect of
well,
land
I guess
ownership.
What is I to a large degree, I provided the historical basis for why the whites are where they are, and it has nothing to do with stealing anything.
Right.
Okay, I provided some numbers that says, can people stop lying about the bloody numbers now? This is irritating, and people are getting killed because CNN is lying about numbers. The number is 21.8%. Grow up, that's the number. Go calculate it or fight with the CIA and the ANC, not with me. It's their numbers. So that's the land thing. As for the momentum thing, I think there is momentum. That momentum has to be maintained. But you need to get actual political muscle behind that, and for that the Freedom Front Plus and the DA have to be harnessed. Don't give them anywhere to hide. Don't corral them, get them in a room, get them on board. It's time for them to start doing the thing now.
Yeah, I think the trouble there is egos. I think that's the problem.
There are methods for getting rid of people's egos.
True. Okay, let me just have a look. I think I've got some questions here. Red Sky says, please tell Harry I understand his passion exactly. I'm tired of the apathy in the country. Thank you. I can't wait to get the book. And then ICAT says, you say we must protest, but how can someone like me with no transport get to a protest? We should start bussing people around like the EFF do.
Correct. It is amazing what people in numbers can do. Has the ANC not taught us?
Yeah.
Can we stop just attacking them for a moment and learn from them? Okay? I have the CIA report in my hands right here. You know, they say the membership, the actual members of the ANC is like 5,000.
Yeah.
Okay, back in 1986, they wrote a report. I have the report in front of me that they wrote to George Bush, and they analyzed the ANC exactly. But the point is, they knew how to harness people in large numbers. You know, of course, the possibility is that you're all just not pissed off enough yet.
Oh, they're gutful.
If you're not, then I'll go away and I'll have a nice life in Canada. But I suggest to you, if you think you're not in trouble, you're lying to yourself.
Yeah. Now, Red Sky has asked, does Harry have a website?
Same thing. Just put the word Amabulu into
there you go.
Google.
Amabulu.
Every time my answer is going to be the same. For the book, for my websites, for everything, I have registered the domain amabulu.com.
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, Eddie says, even at school, we were brainwashed about our country, our history.
Yeah, I'll give you a good example of that. In the East Cape, if you look at the Third Frontier War, okay, around 1801, that period, the truth is that a combination of the Eastern Khoi tribes and the Amagunukwebe Xhosa, who lived at Kongo Straal near Alexandria in the East Cape, that combo chased the whites out of the eastern half of the colony. They chased them all the way to George and Oudtshoorn. Okay, that's how bad it was.
Wow.
The people fled into the Tarka, they fled into the town of Graafrenet, and they fled onto the beach at Port Elizabeth. You are not going to find that in the history book. But you're also not going to find in the history book at exactly the same time the fact that Piet Prinsloo made his way to Gaika and he got protection for the Afrikaners from Gaika. The ANC would never want to admit that Gaika protected the Afrikaners and sent a letter to the governor saying, I want my friends, the Afrikaners, released from your jail. They're never going to say that. They can't afford to say that. And the old apartheid government sure as hell was never going to do that. So you didn't hear your own history, okay? Truth is, we got beaten up by a little Xhosa tribe along with a bunch of the Khoi. Chased the white civilization all the way to George and Oudtshoorn. Try and find that in a regular history book printed either in the old apartheid times or in the new ANC times. I challenge you.
You obviously have a paper on that on the internet somewhere.
Oh, yeah.
What would people search for if they want to find that specific paper?
Black and white allies.
Black and white allies. Okay.
But if they search on Amabulu, they will find my WordPress blog. There's a blog. They'll find the WordPress blog. Don't worry about the URL. Just search in Google on Amabulu. Go up and down. You'll see sometime it says WordPress. As soon as it says WordPress, click on it. At the top of my WordPress blog is a thing called Amabulu Topics. Under those topics, you'll find who stole the land. You'll find my Senekal stuff. You'll find a whole series called Black and White Allies. You'll find things about the first American immigrant. You'll find the interesting history of the Rabbit, the ship that sailed from Batavia, Indonesia, to come and help the Boere at Graafrenet. Bet you nobody knows about that. Okay, you'll find all that stuff there. So go to Google, search on AMABHULU.
Right.
In other words, the Boer people. Go search on that and you'll get a bazillion of responses on Google. Some of them will be the books, some of them will be the blog, some of them will be individual articles. You can go to any one of those articles. I'll take you to the blog, top of the blog page, Amabulu Topics.
Right.
I
would be very, very interested, as I said earlier, to have the article, the blog information, and stuff like that on our new platform, because it is such an integral part of what is South African history. So with your permission,
it's yours to play with. I'm doing all of this because I cannot just sit here and watch my people die.
Yeah.
I cannot just sit here and watch my people die, and I don't understand why my fellow South Africans can't say that in South Africa.
Yeah. Look, what I'll do is I'll speak to Rudy about that, who's actually putting our platform together, and see how simple or how hard it is to do it. But I'm sure it won't be hard. But that'll be fantastic. All right. Now, Harry, is there any final message you'd like to make to the people watching right now? We've got several hundred people watching. Is there a message you'd like to give them?
Yeah, the one is probably a slight apology for me getting very intense, but my heart is aching for my old country.
Oh, I know exactly how you feel, mate.
Okay?
Yeah.
And so that's the first thing. And then at the same time, I'm sort of angry. It's for God's sakes, folks, start doing stuff.
Yeah.
Okay? And we are going to lose people in that process. Okay? We have one man who's, sat a few days in jail in Senekal and is still facing charges. There's going to be a price to pay, but the price now is high. But that's the price for doing nothing for 26 years, okay? The truth is, looking from an eye look, people did nothing for 26 years and just took it. Unfortunately, it now means the price is higher.
Yeah, no, I can't disagree with you. Okay, now Bruce says, please get Harry back here sometime. We'll certainly do that. Okay, now Peter Dutoy says, I will start Groot Trek back west to see if we can gain momentum in this. And ICAT says, the truth is beautiful. And okay, so
The other one thing, Scott, I'm
Yeah.
sorry, I know you need to wrap this up, but one thing folks can do is, and this is what irks me so much. Why do we have so many white, particularly Afrikaners, in squatter camps in the Transvaal?
yeah,
Okay,
that's
where
shocking.
their vote counts zero,
Yeah.
absolutely zero. It doesn't help for them. That's the only thing they got is a vote. They got no help, no support, no nothing.
Yeah.
But they got a vote. Okay. Get them in buses, get them in trucks, get them in vans, in combis, in 4x4s, okay, and drive them to the bloody West where the vote counts.
Mm.
Get farmers in the West to help set up like kibbutz operations. Okay, and if they have to beg, then beg in the streets of Cape Town, not in the streets of Joburg.
Yeah, we've actually got one of our family is Gerben, who's actually working on a very similar type of project to what you just mentioned, like the kibbutz type situation.
Okay, move them now. Stop this thing of just dying there in the Transvaal where it makes no difference. This is what the ANC wants. You're playing their game.
Right. Okay. We started the live stream on a somber note, and we've ended it on a somber note. But once people realize the reality of their situation, and that they've got to start doing something rather than sitting on their hands, I think that people will be stirred up and actually start doing something.
The best TV I've seen all year, maybe in 20 years, was the clip of the EFF running away from the police yesterday when they were being flashbanged and watered down. I haven't enjoyed anything as much as that view. And Mr. Malema, I hope you enjoyed it too,
Yeah.
Because
just for the record, Malema is now calling the police racist as well.
And Mr. Malema, what I can tell you, besides the fact that you clearly don't know history and you don't know where your people came from or even really who they are, my comment would be this. I'm not allowed to call you names. But I will tell you this. We have lots of bears here in our garden. They're here a lot of the time. I got a picture of 4 bears at the same time.
Wow.
And the thing that comes along with bears is bear droppings over my lawn. And we call those Malema. So, it's an offense to bear droppings, but
aren't you being disrespectful to bear droppings, though?
Yeah, I'm being very careful. I'm not allowed to call him names, but I can call bear droppings anything. So I call bear droppings Malema.
That sounds like a good word for me. Okay, Oki Stradham has said, Scott, ask Harry if he believes all countries all over the world has problems. Our problem in South Africa is only part of the whole picture.
Countries all over the world have problems, but I think they're pathetically few who have problems as big as South Africa's. I think the United States is suffering an unbelievable challenge right now.
Yeah.
And I attribute it all to its media. So you got to watch that media of yours in South Africa because it's part of the same sick structure. Yeah, but everybody in life has problems. Every country has problems. But South Africa is now of a nature where I think it's terminal time for whites and coloreds. And there's something I left out, Scott. And I'm so sorry if I'm dragging this out.
No,
but
go ahead.
For me, my moment of truth in my life about racism came when I was about 17, 18. And a colored man came to the gate of our place in 7th Avenue, Newton Park. And he said, he's a builder and he's looking for a job. And I said, well, we're hoping to make a new aviary for my aunt in the backyard. And he said he could build that. And I told him, okay, cool, you're on. And so the first day he turned up to build on this thing, he sort of talked to me when he had a cup of coffee, and he told me in Afrikaans. He looked at me out of this brown face of his with blue eyes and slightly off blonde hair, and he said, I was almost a white man, and then my father married the woman in the kitchen. And I listened to that, and my soul broke. And that was the day I realized that my grandfather was wrong. Everything's not okay in that country. Yeah. This can't be right. When a man has to say that, it can't be right. It's just not right.
Right.
And I would like to think that the people who will be prepared to populate the rest of the country will share that view. And it's also why I say white and colored, of all of them, have had enough of the ANC. Absolutely enough.
Yeah. Now, Winston Young says, respect to you, Harry Booyens. Thank to you and Scott for still looking out for us, even though you've moved on. Much love.
We can't help it. We can't help it.
Yeah,
it's in our hearts.
That's what I say. My passion is getting the message out there to the world, despite the best efforts of YouTube to try and be a spoke in the wheel. Rudy says, what does Harry think about Canada's libtard president?
A hairdo with legs.
Well said. All right.
I got a picture of him drooling as a toddler sitting on Fidel Castro's arm.
Oh, no.
Okay, and then I took Simon. I'm a guitarist. I'm an old band player, and
we'll have to have you on a jamming session.
And I'm reasonably good. So I took Simon and Garfunkel's Mrs. Robinson.
Yeah.
And I changed it to Dear Uncle Castro, and I wrote new words for it. Okay, all to do with fooling the Canadians. Okay.
Marlena, we must get Harry on to a jamming session on Loving Life.
Folks won't take me seriously if they see me doing my
I want to hear that song.
5-year-old routine.
All right. Harry, thank you so much for joining us tonight. We've been talking for about 2.5 hours, but it's been fascinating. And look, for people who've just joined since we went through the maps, if you want to understand... Is that yours?
That's actually that's my mother's warning bell.
Okay. If you want to see the truth, the historical truth about land ownership in South Africa, please go and look at the earlier part of this live stream, because we have the maps up there. Go and get yourself the book Amabhulu, Amabhulu. Search for that on Amazon and you'll come straight up with it. And also search for Amabhulu in Google to see Harry's articles and blog. This man is a very, very smart man, and he's taken this task on to help South Africans. So your job is to be helped, and by
Gee,
going.
Scott?
Sorry, what's that, Harry?
No, am I allowed to say that to my wife? That you said I'm a smart guy?
Well, you are a smart guy. I mean, you're a scientist, and you write patents and stuff like that. So, you've got to be right up there, because that's very technical.
If I were smarter, I might not get quite so upset about my old country, and I'd maybe just keep my head down and work in a corner. That would be probably the very smart thing to do, but my heart won't allow me.
Well, you're an absolute gem, as people say in the side chat. Jaga says, Scott J is the boss.
Hey, you're the pickaninny in comparison with my age.
Yeah, the old fart in the room is Harry, not me. I've got to respect my elders.
Just as we get right.
Huh? Now, Marlena says, would Harry like to jam for us? So there's a formal request by Marlena.
Good Lord. Be specific about the requests.
Well, any sort of music. I mean, look,
Any,
maybe.
I write patterns, and when my head sticks and I can't move, I go down to the basement and I play my guitar. And I had an audience down there, and then we got a cat, and the cat wiped out the audience.
What else, cow? All right, guys.
I can hear people think from here.
I hope you've enjoyed this discussion as much as I have. I love talking to a fellow historian because you know it's so interesting because we have a slightly different area of expertise, and you know sort of the overlap is just fantastic. I love that because it just ratifies and confirms what we're saying, and that's very, very important. Okay, I just want to thank the moderators. Thanks, guys, for. Okay, before I do that, where is it? Naladi says, much appreciated, Scott and Harry. Informative, educational, and definitely wanting to dig deeper via his book. There are a lot of people, I think, who are going to be ordering your book, but we'll see what happens. And
yeah, man, that thing has got me in trouble. Okay.
All right. Okay, let me get back to this. Moderators, thanks, guys, for looking after the side chat. Thanks for everybody who's joined us here tonight. And I really think this has been a very, very important live stream. And please share this live stream with your friends and family so they can see the truth about land ownership in South Africa, not the lies being peddled by the mainstream media and by the ANC, or the corrupt gangster ANC government. And with that, Harry, I just want to thank you once again for joining us. It's been an absolute pleasure having you on. And
my pleasure.
I look forward to seeing you back on our show again.
Sure, anytime.
Fantastic. All
Good
right,
luck,
guys.
Scott.
Please take care. Have a good evening. And as I say, please share this live stream widely so people, if anyone says to you, oh, the Africans were here first, you know, the whites kicked them off their land, you have now empirical proof that this is BS. And that's why I want you to share this around on Facebook, wherever you can. Let's get the word out there. All righty. Take care, Harry. Take care, everybody. Bye for now.
Good luck.